And we are recording. So, welcome everybody. Today I have my special guest, Kyle Mills, who has done, I'm not going to go too deep into the Vince Flynn things because we will cover that a little bit later on. What I want to get to is your latest book. So, Kyle, can you tell us a little bit about this new book and the origin of it? Because it's a little bit interesting.
Yeah, this book is called Fade In. Actually, I have a copy of it right here. Out at the end of July. And this started 20 years ago. I wrote a book called Fade about kind of the suicidal Navy SEAL who had been screwed over by the US government and went on a bit of a rampage when they tried to re-recruit him, and he didn't want to be re-recruited. And at the end, he was shot, and in my mind, he was dead. That was kind of the whole point of the book, that he had no way out. And he was dead for a long time, but my fans loved the character, and I really loved writing the character. And one day, I don't know, like 10 years ago or something, I was out on a long run, and I thought of a way he could have survived. But at the time, I didn't feel like there was the right story for him. And then I went and took over, as you mentioned, the Vince Flynn, Mitch Rapp series. That was for probably 10 years. And I felt like the world today, which is so chaotic, that he was a perfect person to tell that story about the way the world is now. And so I left the Mitch Rapp job and resurrected him to kind of deal with all the weird things that are going on in the world now, because it's very different than it used to be, where you had this kind of monolithic enemy. It was the Soviets for a while, then it was Islamic terrorism, and now it's kind of coming at us from every direction. And he's a little bit of a pop philosopher and pretty dark and pretty funny. So, but also a guy with deadly skills, kind of along the lines of Mitch Rapp. So it was a fun combination.
Oh, for definite. I love the way you have written him in such a calm, and his manner and his humor is so dry. The wit is so dry with him. He's almost the kind of person that after putting down the book, you want to give a call and say, "Hey, do you want to go for a beer?" In fact, I'll go a step beyond that in saying all the characters in the book, the depth of them. Even the side characters, obviously Lowe, you've done just the depth of him alone, it must have taken some creation, and right down to I can't remember who said it. I'm going to quote somebody now, and I can't remember. Somebody said, write every character in the book as if the entire book is written about them. So even when you've got a drug dealer in a BMW showing up for a moment, that it disappears and fades away, even that has so much kind of reality to it, that it brings the whole book to life. So, does that take some time for you? Do you have to sit back and really piece these small characters together, before you kind of put them in the book, or how do you go about that?
Yeah, it's funny. I kind of early in my career, I was good friends with a really great literary novelist named Tim Sandlin, and he read my first book, which was, kind of it is a little amateurish, and he handed it back to me and said, there's a lot of great stuff in here, but books are about people. And I was focused on the action and the plot and the investigations and all these, and that really struck me. And my process really has become, I call it applied schizophrenia. I try to become that character. And so I don't plan out what they do or say. Sometimes it surprises me. And, but I want that to me, it feels real. I'm inhabiting that character, even the minor ones. Wow. And I once wrote a book in the first person. And man, I'll tell you, that was the challenge, is to make the characters that weren't the first person character not all just seem like, pawns that you move around the chessboard. And so I love books that are about deep characters that you care about. And I love the action and all that and the plots and stuff too, but that's to me the anchor of a novel.
Oh, definitely. I mean, you are so right with one of the advice I was given. I can't remember who from, which is really embarrassing. So I apologize to whoever told me. But the advice I was given when I started writing was, plots are 10 a penny. People are what sell. If you make simple plots but with complicated characters, and that's something that you seem to have done here so well. That kind of you're not very far into the book before you're engaged, all of them, and it's just I'm a big fan. I'm becoming a fanboy more by the minute. So, so with regards to your characterization, and you were saying that sometimes they surprise you. How do you work when you come into writing this? Do you have like an idea of the plot to start with, and then just like kind of start and see how it goes, or is this something that you just say, I'm going to just start writing and see what happens?
No, I'm probably the most maniacal outliner in the business. So the outline for this book, and this book's probably around 100,000 words, was probably about 35,000 words. So I know where it's going. I mean, in a way that once the outline's done, I just have to, turn every word into 3 words, and the novel's done. So the problem, of course, comes when I get surprised by characters, or, as sometimes you write something down on an outline and it looks great and it doesn't look good on the page. Mm-hmm. So, the greatest idea ever sometimes has to get completely discarded, and sometimes, I find I don't follow it at all. I write over the outline. So I put the outline up, and then I write over it. But sometimes I find what I did was just push it down to the bottom, and I didn't actually write what was in it. But what the outlining process, the ridiculous outlining process, does for me is I understand the characters and I understand the story. And I understand it so well at that point that I can deviate from it if I need to, and it isn't kind of a catastrophe.
Brilliant. And so the question that I tend to ask everybody is how, because you said you got this kind of controlled schizophrenia, optional schizophrenia that you have where you put yourself in your character's kind of mindset. How does that affect when you finish the book, you've done the writing, and then you kind of put it aside? Do you find that you are still with your characters, or you hear their voices, or that kind of thing when you're kind of living your daily life?
Yeah. Sometimes it's worse than others. I think I wrote a serial killer book once, and a lot of the scenes were from the serial killer's point of view, and it was really awful. Like it took me a while to get into character. I remember pacing around my office because I'm really not the serial killer type. And so I'd have to get in his headspace, and then I'd have a hard time getting out of it at the end of the day. And my wife forbade me from ever writing another serial killer book because she's like, you're dark, and it's just like, it's awful. And I never did. So the interesting thing about doing that, I assume it's just like being an actor, that the more different the character is from you, the more challenging it is. Like writing women or writing, terrorists or something that hate America. And, I've got to get into that mindset where, I'm running around the house screaming, death to America, or else it doesn't feel authentic.
Yeah, I suppose. Method actors have similar problems. I think it was Jack Nicholson when he did his recording of one of the was it The Shining or what? It was one of the movies where his wife she took the kids and left him for a while the recording was going on because she said he terrified me. He really got into character. So I suppose it's a very similar kind of parallel in many ways.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to live with Jack Nicholson as the guy from The Shining, probably.
So inspiration wise, with like kind of when you come into writing females, do you call in help from like family members and that kind of thing for would a woman really say this, or is this something you just kind of use your best discretion with?
Yeah, I think I mostly use my best description. I've been lucky to have really close female friends all my life. My best friend as a child was a woman or a girl at the time. And one of my best friends after college. And so my wife, obviously my mother. So I feel like I do an okay job with that, unless it gets technical, like clothing or makeup or things like that, where I want to be authentic.
Yeah.
And but I feel like I don't feel like I get too many notes from my wife when she reads it, other than I do double question marks and then the name of the person I need to ask, so I can search it, and I'll have double question mark Kim, and it'll be something somebody thinks about, an outfit or whatever, that I have no clue what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I can understand that. And with regards to like the things like when you're referring to CIA and that kind of thing, do you have a network of numbers you can call to say, look, do you guys do this, or how would we do that, or anything along those lines?
Yeah, I've been really lucky. My father was an FBI agent. Later became the director of Interpol, and he was the legal attaché to the United Kingdom. So I really grew up around FBI, Spec Ops, CIA, MI6. So it's much easier for me to contact them, and obviously because I grew up knowing those characters. A lot of them are part of the characters I create. So I mean, I'm so old. Like if I created the head of MI6, it would be Chris Kerwin, who I knew from way back in the day.
Oh, wow.
So I was lucky to, or the director of the FBI, the one that I knew. So I've been lucky that way. I mean, it's easier to do research now that the internet exists, which didn't when I wrote my first book, and I leaned really heavily on the DEA, who I knew some people at. But now it's a little easier. But even with interviews and stuff, it used to be on TV. If they interviewed the head of the CIA, you had to like get it on your VCR, or else it was gone. And now you
Yeah.
can go and you could go and look at video of every CIA director for the last whatever decade easily, and really get a feel for what they're like if you didn't know them personally.
Yeah, I mean, it has made a massive difference, and of course, with so many people from the intelligence community, kind of on the likes of LinkedIn and that kind of thing, now it does make it so much easier to reach out to them, and and you will find a lot of them are actually really willing to talk about a lot of the goings on and that kind of thing, because of the fact that they don't really have too many people to talk to.
No, it's funny. When I was first getting into it, I knew Tom Clancy. He was a friend of my father's, and I was trying to ask about research because it was before the internet, and he told me, well, two things. He's like, first of all, there was a thing called the 1-800 phone book, which was a phone book just of companies. And it was just like, call the company. And he said people love to talk about themselves and their job. And the other was, it was very much about catalogs and prospectuses and all these things from companies that maybe build the weapon systems and all these things. So there were ways to do it back then, but man, it's so much nicer now.
Oh yeah. You can type anything in now, and if there isn't a paper on it somewhere, then there's more than likely a YouTube video or some crazy out there who think they know how it works. So yeah,
or
it's
guns even. Like I don't know anything about guns, so I have to rely. I have a friend that I completely rely on for that.
Oh, well, yeah, I actually used to live around the corner from, I think it was Tom Clancy's editor, and I remember buying a load of his at a garage sale, buying a load of his like the pre-release
Oh yeah, right.
versions
Yeah.
of the books, yeah, and I had a whole bunch of them. I actually, I think they're at a friend's in Arizona City at the moment, but yeah, story for another day. So yeah, so I mean, obviously, with your parents or your father being in that kind of a background, what was it that made you decide to go down the route of becoming a writer? Can we talk about like the kind of inspiration there?
Mhm. It's a weird story, but I kind of fell into it by accident. I was a banker, a commercial banker, And I was a big rock climber at the time, really kind of obsessed with rock climbing. And those were kind of the two things I did in my life. And I never did anything creative. But I'd always really admired people who could. So I decided I was going to build furniture. And my wife said, yeah, but you're not really very handy, which was true. And I think we live in a very snowy climate. And I think she didn't want the garage full of all my tools, so she couldn't park in it. And she said, well, you love to read. Why don't you write a novel? Which, I don't know. It seemed like a stupid idea because I'd never studied writing. I studied economics. And I'd never done any creative writing at all. So it just stuck in my head though. And I thought this would be a fun project. My mom will read the book and it'll go in a drawer. And so I literally bought a bunch of books like How to Write a Novel by for dummies and stuff like that, and read them all and read a few novels, like studied a few novels. I picked like 3 novels that I admired or that were really popular at the time. And I studied them and I set about writing a novel. And then it turned out way better than I thought. And I thought, well, maybe I should try to get it published. And it got published and it became a bestseller. And yeah, and then the funny thing was I never intended to write a second one. And my agent signed me to a 2-book deal, and that was horrible. It's like the worst year of my life writing that second book. So, but it was 25 books later, so it worked out.
Wow, that's absolutely amazing, and I'm so glad you did, because I'm loving what you've written so far. With that in mind, I do tend to ask this for a lot of authors. What would be your advice to any aspiring authors out there that are kind of thinking about trying their hand at becoming a published author?
I think do it for the love of it, and then like I did, and then worry about publication and all that. But focus on doing something you love, because I think that really shows. And a second piece of advice is, once you're done, don't love it too much, because some of it's not going to be very good, and you have to be able to admit that to yourself.
Yeah, I think I remember reading that in a lot, because I did, very similar to you. I read a lot of the books and the courses and that kind of thing, and I think that the same advice seemed to be everywhere. Kind of don't get too attached to your first project, as it were, because it probably will never make it to the shelf, and neither will the next one or the next one, but perhaps 5 or 6 down the line is where, so you have to love it that much that you have to be prepared to let the first few of your babies go, as it were, to be able to get the one on the shelf. So,
and there's got to be some tough love there. You've got to be able to evaluate it in a realistic way. I mean, I've written probably around 25 novels, and just a couple of days ago, I wrote a chapter and thought, I spent the whole day on it, and then thought, that's just redundant crap, and wadded it up and threw it in the garbage.
Yeah, it really can be tough, and especially when you put things in, whether it be a scene or a line or anything at all that you love, that you really think makes a difference, and the editor goes, nope, and you go, and they go, no, that doesn't serve a purpose, doesn't move the story on, it's got to go. And it can be a really tough call sometimes, and at the end of the day, I mean, I know it's your book, but if sometimes, and I've had to do it myself, you have to admit defeat and say, yeah, the editor is right. I'm holding on to the precious, but I need to let it go. So, I mean,
not too much ego. You got to keep your ego out of it.
Yeah. And I dare say you'll know that, probably a hell of a lot, well, definitely a hell of a lot better than me, because of, you've done certainly achieved a hell of a lot more than I ever have. But it still is, no matter like kind of how much I seem to progress, I still seem to have those moments where I want to call the editor and say, can I please keep it in, please?
Sometimes they're wrong, sometimes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I suppose. And of course, if we look at any kind of, creative art, whether it be anything from painting to movies and everything in between, sometimes people go outside the norm or do things a little bit differently, and it turns out to be the best thing that ever happened. I mean, obviously, most of the time it turns out to be bloody awful, and and he just needs to be binned. But occasionally there is that one kind of diamond in the rough.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you got to take risks. I feel like you don't want to write the same thing over and over again. That would have, yeah, I can't imagine doing that. I've been really lucky in my career in that I've been able to write about a bunch of different subjects, kind of in different styles and things like that. So it always feels a little bit fresh to me. Every time I go into a book, I think, what's my challenge for this book? What new technique can I use, or do something that I don't feel comfortable with? And I don't think it'd be apparent to the reader, but there is always something in there that's a challenge to me that I get excited about.
Yeah, I can imagine that. And it sounds like even when you did the first person book that you mentioned there, that in itself, that because a lot of people, for those who are just readers and not writers, they won't know the difference between omniscient, third person, first person. But omniscient is something that I prefer because you can write the several different angles in one chapter. Third person, obviously, coming from the point of view of one particular character, but first person, that has got to be a hell of a lot more challenging in the sense of you can't put the intentions or thoughts or be somewhere else or have a view through another person's eyes. So it's really difficult when you're writing in this first person perspective and you have to say they appeared to have got the grip of, or rather than so and so really instantly took to what was being said. So I mean, what were some of the other challenges that you faced with writing in that first person perspective?
That was an interesting one because I wanted to be really strict with it. So a lot of people, I think it's become a little bit in vogue to write a first person character. So to be clear to the non sort of writing wonks out there, that would be your character speaks as I. So I got in the car, I went here, I went there. And then the next chapter, they'll do it more in third person with another character from another character's point of view. So it's a mix of the two. But I didn't want to do that. I want to write a first person character. And boy, I'll tell you, when you're writing a thriller, there are a lot of scenes that your person character isn't in. The evil guy plotting or whatever, or the terrorist blowing something up, they're not there. They come to investigate later. So that is an incredible challenge to plot. I love writing in the first person. I love it. But I hate plotting in the third person or the first person. And then what we were talking about earlier, the idea that every other character is flat because you only know them through the eyes of the one character. You never know what they're thinking. All that has to be shown. That took me a few drafts because I think I wrote it and I thought, yeah, this is great. And then I read it and I thought every character in this book is terrible except for the first person character, which really works. I had to go rewrite it to flesh out all that other stuff that was going on.
Yeah, because I mean, it's one of those things where, with the first person perspective, in order, I mean, if you're writing somebody who has a psychology degree or is a profiler or something, it would be wonderful to be able to explain that, you could tell from what they were wearing and how they've spoken, blah, 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 and give a bio of that person with everybody that they meet. But if you've got somebody who's, an anti-hero or somebody who's not the sharpest knife, but they're a blunt instrument, for example, more so than a brainiac, it's going to be a hard time having to kind of get that over. So, but you seem to have mastered it pretty well. And I know I mentioned this earlier, but the very, very brief scene with the drug dealer in the BMW, I know I'm repeating myself, but it was written so well, very few words, not overly described, but you instantly knew enough about him to know who he was, what was going on, why he was there, and get a kind of the gist enough. The balance was just perfect. So so obviously this is something that has come from writing first person to be able to kind of use just enough words to describe somebody and the reader to be able to get to grips with a good idea of the kind of person they're looking at.
Yeah, I've always been really big on economy too. If I can use one word instead of two words, I always will. And so sometimes, yeah, you have to come up with some clever way to, describe your character or describe his relationship with others or whatever. And so that challenge, as opposed to just talking about it, on and on and on. And, the other thing is that your point of view character can be wrong. They might meet somebody and hate them and then find out later, oh yeah, I was wrong. That's a good guy. So that's another interesting thing, because your narrator is sort of necessarily unreliable because it's only their perspective. And, people have perspectives, but there's no right or wrong in them.
Yeah, that's it. If I had $1 for every time I was wrong, I'd have at least $3 now. So
exactly. I mean, that's even true in the third person, where your point of view character can be wrong about things.
Yeah. I really like that. And then of course, going on to the future, do you have any, what are your long-term plans with more upcoming books? Have you got anything already starting working on, projects you're working on, or are we allowed to know a little, or
yeah, I just finished the first draft of the next book, and this is going to be a series with Fade being the main character. So, and I'm still, I'm just really interested, as we talked about before, in what's going on with the world today. Because you have in the United States, you have like really heavy partisanship. The U.S. is kind of in the process of changing its relationship to the world, for better or for worse. You have runaway technology. You have countries doing really acting very irrationally, like Russia. They're attacking Ukraine. That was never going to work out for them. Hamas attacking Israel. So it's become a very unpredictable, somewhat volatile world. Whereas maybe back in the day, under the dominance of the US and Soviet Union, kind of the West-East, they had control. Like, it was a little more stable. You didn't know if you're going to get nuked, but you probably weren't going to have weird fires going off everywhere, right? And so, the rise of kind of the tech billionaires, who both have extraordinary wealth and political power, as well as extraordinary reach into our lives, like no one's ever had before. And what are they going to do with that? So these are all like really interesting questions to deal with. Ethical stuff, medicine, our medical therapies are being created that are extraordinarily beneficial, but also extraordinarily expensive and difficult to administer. So now there's going to be this ruling class that has access to that we don't. So I'm really interested, because I think that's where the world's going, and it's a fun but complicated thing to tackle, because you also want to make the books interesting and fast-paced and action-oriented, but also, create a contemporary threat. Having said that, climate change is a tough thing to make a thriller out of. You don't want slow emergencies.
Yeah, no, I can see how. I mean, obviously, one of the hardest parts, and what I should imagine will be a massive challenge for you right now, is with this kind of opening of Pandora's box of the internet and misinformation, disinformation, no control directly over information. Like, years ago when we had the television, the radio, and the newspapers, that was all that had to be kind of regulated. But now there's a saying, it's something like the lie will have traveled halfway around the world before the truth has got its shoes on. And of course, trying to not only put that kind of into context in a book, but also at the same time trying to remain completely objective, because let's face it, the internet is dividing so many groups of people right now. Whether it's climate change, for example, there are people who say climate change is going to kill us all in 5 years and we're all going to blah blah blah. Then there are other people who go, no, it doesn't exist, there's no such thing. And of course, trying to write something into a book and remain neutral, whether your character believes it or whether he's fighting it or whether whether he doesn't or whatever the case may be, must be really, really difficult, because you don't want the reader to kind of think you're sending a political message. So yeah, can you talk about that? Because I know that you tackled something that most authors try to avoid, which is COVID, and you've took the ball by the horns and you've gone, no, I'm going to deal with that one. So can you tell us a bit about the challenges there?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because I've been in this business a really long time, 30 years, I guess, or something. And you can see how society evolves in the way fans react to your work.
Mm-hmm.
So when I started out, certainly there was partisanship, but it was much, much less than it is now. And, certainly there were conspiracy theories. I mean, thank God, right? I'm a professional conspiracy theorist, but not as widespread, certainly. And there weren't as many of them. So now people are very sensitive, much, much more sensitive to anything they see as political, anything they see as an error. And they get really upset. Like, it used to be people would read, you could read whatever. You read maybe you were pro-Russia, but you still read Tom Clancy because they were great books, right?
Yeah.
But now, it's much more volatile. People are much more sensitive to it, and they get much angrier about it if they see something that they don't agree with. And so I try to tell the stories from a very neutral standpoint. I mean, you would never see the word Democrat or Republican in my book. I would never touch on anything like, I don't know, abortion or trans rights or something that would be a hot button for one group or the other. I try to stay with pretty classic themes. I think everybody can agree, maybe, that giving people, sort of a ruling class, an enormous amount of power to message us, because now, like you said, it's pretty chaotic out there, but it's not going to remain that way. They're going to take control, and AI is going to allow them to do that. And they're going to be able to, they know that we're staring at our screens 8 hours a day, and they're going to control everything we see. And the idea that they're not going to one day decide, well, I'm going to get my message to them. And they have an incredible power to do so. I mean, I know some people think that Bill Gates is putting chips in us with the COVID vaccine and stuff. And the reason that's ridiculous is because he doesn't need to. They know where you are, what you bought, what you think, every friend you've ever had, everybody you've ever dated, everything you've ever read. And all that can be pumped into AI so that they can message each individual in the way that they want to be messaged and manipulated. And they've done studies on this. It works, and this is coming. So I think when I talk about this, I'm talking about tyranny. Whether it comes from the left or right is irrelevant. It's come from both sides throughout history, but it's coming. And we're going to end up with a very small ruling class, and it's international. It's not American. It's not Democrat or Republican. It's rich and powerful, basically. Yeah. They're all going to cling together. They intermarry. They all go to the same schools. They're going to engineer their children, which is already possible if you've got the money. And it's sort of like H.G. Wells wrote a book called The Time Machine, in which the ruling class completely evolved away from the lower classes. And so that's what I'm kind of interested in. And I'm very anti-partisan because I believe that partisanship is a con perpetrated by the ruling class to keep normal people fighting amongst themselves so they don't see what's going on. And it works like crazy.
It really is fantastic. The illusion of choice that keeps everybody at each other's throats. And
I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat, but you're just perpetuating the same people over and over and over again, right? I mean, what is it? Everybody hates Congress, but there's a 95% reelection rate. They're doing a pretty good job, right? So those are the themes that I'm really interested in. And I have a character in this book that's a tech billionaire who's very concerned with the fact that governments are becoming kind of performance art. They don't really fix anything because when things break, they can blame the other people. It's good for them.
Yeah.
And that there are a lot of very serious problems in the world, and he wants to kind of control that to keep the place from imploding. And he realizes that he has a great deal of power to do so. You know, you think about a guy like Elon Musk, who, when I wrote this book, wasn't involved in politics, and Biden was president. But, you know, here's a guy who, you know, without him, we can't communicate without his satellites. Our government can't communicate, can't send anything into space without him. You know, and then it's kind of a big deal how much power these people are gaining, and how are they going to use it? I don't know.
Yeah, the private entities, unfortunately, are starting to get a very, very strong grip. I mean, you know, a lot of people don't realize this. I mean, you know, I worked in intelligence for many, many years, and MI5 and MI6 and GCHQ had their information on really secure servers that were, and I mean, the levels that were involved in keeping that information was beyond what most people could imagine. Now that everything, the information wise, is stored on Amazon, from MI5, MI6 to GCHQ, it's all on Amazon. Has the service to our intelligence, and of course, you know, there's lots of things like that. I've watched over the years, working for different allied governments and different intelligence agencies, a man leave his job on a Friday at a particular intelligence agency and come back on a Monday morning after he's left his job working for a private intelligence institute, doing the same job at the same desk for twice the pay, and now working in the private sector. And the private sector now makes up over 70% of the intelligence community. So it's really something that is the government are having less and less and less control to these tech billionaires and these kind of, you know, private entities and whatever else. And it is extremely concerning.
Yeah. And you know, it was interesting. I was just reading. So, you know, as Europe sort of moves maybe in its own direction from a defense and intelligence standpoint from America, that, you know, they're all realizing that the entire European internet is controlled by 3 American companies, right? Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, and we could just shut it off.
Yeah.
And we've also seen that those companies are, you know, willing to take a knee to the president of the United States to a surprising degree. And, you know, that is not, again, intended to be partisan. The president's Trump now, but it could be a Democrat next time, and they're going to have their own, and they're going to kneel right back down to them, you know, for their, you know, because clearly there's nothing they won't do for money. So no matter how wealthy they are, there's nothing they won't do for another $10. And these are really interesting switches that can be toggled and do catastrophic damage. Whereas, you know, 100 years ago, that just, you could start a war, but that was a pretty big enterprise that had to be done by the government. But that's no longer the case, really. And that's, my tech billionaire is very aware of that. Like, he owns utilities, huge amounts of utilities in the United States, and he could just flip a switch and just shut everybody's power off.
Yeah. And this is, I mean, it just goes to show that, and like revisiting what we were saying about the message that these people are seeing and receiving via social media. When you said, you know, we don't need to inject a chip in you, you know, everybody has one of these that they carry around with them everywhere they go, and their life is on there. You know, for a lot of people, they use, you know, they pay for things with their phone, every photograph, everywhere they go, it's all on there. And like you said, they're spending so many hours. The algorithms pick up and can tell you, you know, when you're more active, when you're more than likely sleeping, what time of day you're more than likely going to be doing something, thinking something, blah blah blah. And of course, you're not, we if we go up against $1 trillion computer, we are going to lose every single time. You know, and of course, it knows us better than we know ourselves. And when you say that these guys could literally get a message to almost every person on the planet and get them into a unified way of thinking, it's something that is scary because it could be used for world peace, but equally used to completely set the world against each other.
It won't be. I'm certain of that. It will not
Oh
be
yeah.
used for world peace.
Yeah, no. Peace doesn't pay bills, unfortunately. But it will be used for profits. It might not be used to start World War III, but but this is the thing. It could be. The potential to go either way is great. Unfortunately, I think what it will, like I say, it'll just result in the rich getting richer, the poor, working harder to pay the rich, and we will end up with that H.G. Wells kind of community that you mentioned.
And this is what my character wants to prevent. He realizes this. He's saying the exact same thing you do. It's very, very powerful. It could be used for world peace. So let's see if we can do that, as opposed to having it used for evil and to solidify these people in power. But the power that I don't know, it's crazy. Just a few days ago, I was thinking about the death of the leader of Romania and his execution. And I swear to God, all I was doing was thinking. And I pulled up my YouTube the next day, and there was a video of the death of, about the death of this guy. And I sit there and I do this all the time where I think, what did I do on the computer that would that it would know that I was interested in that subject matter? And I just can't think of a single thing. So the power of it is incredible.
We'll have a conversation when I finish recording, and I'll let you know a couple of little bits of insider information that I've become privy to recently.
It's fascinating though, because it's also like people you're around.
Yeah.
So you find out that, oh, why am I getting this? Oh, it's because your friend who you had dinner with and your phones were close is interested in that.
Yeah.
So
they can work out so much. I mean, your phone can literally determine which side of the bed you sleep on. It's the way they work now is so phenomenal, and the information that they harvest is unbelievable. And the way the likes of agencies like the NSA get around this, they subcontract. So there's this thing of where the head of an agency can be called before the people they answer to, because obviously you got the likes of the CIA, which is an executive branch, and whatever else, but they can be asked, are you spying on the American people? And they can truthfully hand on heart say, no, we're not. They are, and if we want any information, we go to them, but they're private, nothing to do with us. And the private intelligence agencies can do so much more because they don't have the same regulations, and the minute we go on to anything and click those little deadly words, I agree to the terms and conditions, you have just said you can do what you want, basically. Nobody reads them. They update them when they want. They don't tell you what the updates are. They just say they've been updated. And of course, we all go, I agree, and we all carry on. And the majority of people have got no idea exactly how much we are handing over for free of our lives to these private entities.
Yeah, it is. It's incredible. I remember getting in the ground floor of that, and I think the company was called Choice Point or something, that I got a demonstration of what they could do on the phone, and pulled myself up, and man, everywhere I'd ever lived, all the loans I have, credit cards, it was really an amazing. If you had a arrest record, it would have been on there. And now, I mean, that was 20 years ago or something. Now it's just a light years beyond that. And and AI is going to allow. The problem, I think, with a lot of stuff for the intelligence community has been, it's just information overload. They have so much information, they just can't, there's no way to analyze it all. But AI is going to solve that problem, I think. And that's going to be a terrifying thing.
Yeah, there's already filtration systems in place because we don't have the manpower in any of the global intelligence agencies to monitor. Well, not to monitor anybody, but to be able to closely look at everybody. Everything we do always is constantly being monitored and recorded. But it's not until somebody becomes a blip on the radar that we then have to go, oh, let's see what we can pull up on this person. So they have to do something to become that blip on the radar. But the AI systems that are being developed now are literally starting to predetermine whether somebody may or may not be a future threat, and then bringing them up to the forefront, saying this person is becoming radicalized or is paying too much attention to this particular thing that we think might be. So that in itself is kind of scary, in the sense of it's a good thing if it can predict, but it's also a bad thing, because the last thing you want to do in kind of 50 years or 100 years from now in the future is to be kind of committed for or sentenced for a crime that you haven't even thought you were capable of doing yet. I think there was a movie on that, wasn't there, at some point?
Yeah, Tom Cruise, I think.
Yeah,
but and I have this suspicion, it's a complete suspicion that happened to me, because there was a period in my life that if I ever got on a plane, I always got the random search. And I mean, this wasn't like every now and then, and it was all over the world, because I also live in Spain, and I knew that if I went to my little Granada, Spain thing, that I was getting pulled up. They were searching all my bags. It happened here in Jackson Hole. And I was like, I thought, I'll bet my search history is interesting. Because it's like, how could I kill so-and-so, or what poison could be used, or how do you build a bomb? How do you build a methamphetamine lab? And I was like, did somebody get a hold of that and thought, we really got to track this guy? And then eventually they were like, oh, wait, he's a novelist.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me, to be honest with you.
No. I was always afraid I was getting on the no-fly list. They're like, this guy's a complete nut.
Yeah, it's there is something to be said about an author's search history. It is a weird and wonderful place. Next time you get on a plane, have a little look at your boarding pass and see if there is 4 S's printed on it in the bottom right hand corner usually. And what that is a sign to all the stuff from the minute you have your boarding pass. If there are then 4 S's, that's security risk. So what will happen is, the minute you're in the airport, security will look at your boarding passes, or it'll scan and it'll blip before you go through, and it'll show up on the screen. Yes, search him, check him, blah blah blah. Even down to when you show them to the stewardess getting on the plane, she'll go, yes, seat 13A. She's like, oh, we've got to keep our eye on this one, and you'll be logged all the way through. If you've got those 4 S's on your boarding pass, that's a sign.
Yeah. They gave me TSA pre, so I feel like they mustn't be too worried about me anymore, but I'm going to look for that.
Yeah, check that out. So, that used to be the case. I don't think they've changed it. I think it's still exactly the same as it used to be. But yeah, and that'll pretty much get you stopped and checked everywhere. And usually, if you've had one, then next time you go to book a flight anywhere, it'll ping up and like kind of, oh, this guy's a previous security risk. Put him again as a security risk, just to make sure that he doesn't slip through the net. And so yeah, that may be something that you might have to learn to live with. Sorry.
It used to be one-way tickets too, right after 9/11. Yeah. And so you'd go on a book tour and they're just constantly searching you because you're all on one-way tickets all the way around the country.
Yeah. Well, again, that in itself is something that. So there are certain things that can flag up that would scare airlines, especially if it's tickets paid for in cash. One-way tickets that they will look at and go, well, why? And then so there are so many factors, and especially if you've been a previous security risk, or they do searches and that. So there's a long bunch of boxes, and you've only got to tick one of them, and they've got a better safe than sorry kind of policy. So
I may be screwed for the rest of my life.
Yeah, maybe use a pseudonym and or change your name by deed, Paul.
Exactly.
So yeah, I mean, we're approaching the top of the hour, and you teased us with some of the things that you've got coming in the future. My next question is going to be about the book that never made it. Was the one that is sitting on the hard drive somewhere that you regret, that you think, you know what, I would love. And I saw your eyes go down in the thought there for a minute, so you know exactly which one I'm talking about. I would love to revisit that one Monday and breathe some life into it.
I have the kind of a bunch of notes for a sci-fi novel that someday I'd like to write, but it's so far out of my genre that I'd almost have to put it out as a pseudonym. So maybe in retirement, I'll dig into that and do it. So, because I like all different genres of books. I read pretty broadly, so not just in the thriller world. So I've always, I've always thought it'd be fun to write kind of in a completely different genre and try that. But for now, I'm pigeonholed, and I'm definitely a thriller writer, and probably will be for the rest of my career.
Well, sci-fi is definitely a big bite. It really is, because of that in itself, it brings out for want of a better term, the geeks who will notice absolutely everything. He spoke this language on that planet, and they don't use this particular axe, but yeah, and so you've got to create worlds, not just characters. So it's something that really is. I remember the guy I know who wrote a sci-fi book. It was his one and only book before he passed away. It took him his entire life, and unfortunately, it wasn't published until after he passed away. But yeah, the worlds that he had to build around it, were amazing. So, what about genres that you maybe kind of have looked at in the past and have said, I'd love to write a Western or such and such, or and had a dabble with? Is there anything that you've kind of toyed with and
Yeah, I mean, it'd be fun to do a Western. I live in Wyoming. And truth be told, I kind of feel like I do. Like, I mean, I've always thought of the Mitch Rapp series as modern Westerns. I mean, he's kind of the lone gunman, right?
Yeah.
And, I think when I first started reading, Vince Flynn, I thought, it's kind of the outlaw Josie Wales. Sort of the man of few words who's just, the interesting thing about Mitch is you never worry that he's going to get killed. So that's not part of the tension.
Yeah.
You never worried about the outlaw Josie Wales getting killed. You just wondered how he was going to kill everybody else. Right. And so I feel like I'd probably be pretty good at Westerns because all I have to do is set the story I already had, go back 150 years, and I can set it right out my back door.
Yeah, that should be an easy one for you to put together. To be fair,
yeah, and I love Westerns. So,
well,
it'd be fun. They've sort of fallen out of favor, but I almost feel like they're starting to come back in the movies.
Yeah, there's always room for a good Western. Hollywood has proved that.
I never get tired of them.
Yeah, so I think other than the customary questions, I think I'm going to ask one last question, I think, on with regards to writing, and that is going to be, if you could collaborate with any author, dead or alive, which one would be the kind of the one that you say that would have to be I like their writing, or I'd love to collaborate and do a book together with that particular person?
George Orwell.
Oh, wow. Right. Yeah, great choice.
He's been a huge influence on me. The thing I love about his books, and I mean, he wrote very broadly, but I'm talking specifically like 1984 and Animal Farm, is he really portrayed political power, as being a two-way street, that he never absolved the people for ceding their power to the dictator. They always seemed a little guilty of that. And I love that, because I think there's a tendency to write dictators as these evil people who oppress others, and the underdog is the good guy and blameless. And he never copped out that way. He felt good about insulting his readers. And I loved that.
Yeah, I do like that, actually. And I mean, 1984 was so ahead of its time anyway. And I think, I don't know if you can, my copy's up there somewhere. I think it's on the top shelf towards the right. But yeah, it was something that we don't seem to be a million miles away from that becoming more of a guidebook than a fiction book.
Yeah, and it was like just really down to the details of like the TV that they could see you.
Yeah.
You know, it's definitely, well, that we're there.
Oh, for sure. So, well, with that in mind, I'm going to put links to all of your kind of websites and that kind of thing in the show notes below. But are you happy for kind of fans to reach out to you? And
Yeah, absolutely. I'm active
brilliant.
on social media. I've got an email address that I monitor on my website. So yeah, absolutely reach out.
Wonderful.
Always fun to hear what people think of the books, and you know, even if
Definitely.
it's criticism.
Yeah, not too much though. Be nice. No, it is a brilliant book. It's absolutely fantastic. It comes out next month. It's called Fade In, and I'm just absolutely glued to it at the moment. I'm about that far from the end, and just loving every moment so far. So thank you very much, and please, if you haven't, you know, kind of, it can be pre-ordered at the moment, I believe.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So, so if you're watching this before the release, you can go and get your pre-order. And if you're watching after, then please go and get a copy now. You won't regret it. It's wonderful.
Thanks.
Brilliant, Carl. Thanks for being here.